One thing I wanted to mention from yesterday regarding the research, with the committee of monks, is that Venerable Jampa was very generous in sharing with them how research is done by scholars in the West. And she showed them, because just now, recently, they've been digitizing the entire Tibetan canon. And so especially with the Mula Sravastivada, which is 4,000 folio sides, it's really, really long. If you just type in a word, then it will bring up, it's like search and find, and it'll show you all the situations of that word in the Vinaya. So it makes doing research so much easier. These monks don't have those tools, so they had divided the Vinaya up into sections, and then of course each one is reading it, looking for particular points and permissions and so on. But it's so easy to miss something if you're tired and you're reading, or you forget, you skip a folio or something like that. So she copied all her materials onto an external drive and gave it to them. She didn't have time, though, to sit with them and show them how to do the search function. And most of the monks don't know English. And so right now the search function is by using the Wiley system, so you're writing in Roman characters. And I think they're working on doing it so that you can use the Tibetan script itself to search. But still, your keyboard is a Roman character keyboard. So these are skills that the Tibetan scholars still have to learn, and resources that they don't have that are present now in the West. So it was quite interesting to see that, and also to hear them discuss, what research meant and how research was done. And, Jampa really stressing that in the West, when you do research, you have to present what you find, even if it disagrees with what your own idea is. Yeah, that you can't just leave parts out because they disagree with your thesis or your ideas or what you want the outcome to be. Yeah, so I don't know how that is in the Tibetan research, but it was interesting to really be with scholars and see, have this discussion of what research means. Yeah. Okay, so let me move on to some other things that happened when I was in Dharamsala. I met with Venerable Damcha and her 3 nuns. They have a community. Does anybody remember the name of it? I can't remember. It might be Dharma Dita. I'm not sure. But it's a community just of 4 nuns living in Dharamsala, Western nuns, and starting their own community and organizing things and studying and so on. So it was really nice to see that. And then also I went to Tusamling, which was established by Venerable Zangmo, a Dutch nun, and is a place for nuns and women to learn Tibetan and to do the philosophical studies. And so it's a beautiful place. She too started with absolutely nothing but herself and her own idea, raised all the money, herself, and built this place. And it is designed to be a place where nuns from all the Tibetan traditions can come. So it's not affiliated with one school or the other. The main difficulty they have is living in India with the visa situation, because the Indian government is continually changing the policies. And recently, since the Mumbai terrorist attacks, they've made the restrictions, they've increased restrictions for Westerners to be able to stay there. So then you always have these visa problems of you're there and you're studying, and then after 6 months you have to go and then come back again. So, but still, the community, I go there every time I visit India, and there's, usually some continuity of the people, but a very, very nice community. And I really congratulate her for what she's done. And when I was there, I spoke to the nuns who were there and said, you people may not realize what came before you that got this place going, and talked a little bit about the history and what Venerable Zangmo had done. And the people kind of like woke up, like, oh wow, we didn't know like everything she had to do to get a place going in India. It is not easy. Yeah, and when it was very interesting when the new nuns who first came there, she says they always say, "Oh, I love this place. I'm so happy. It's just wonderful," and she always tells them wait 3 months, because her experience has been after 3 months, people start complaining. At the beginning, like, oh, this place is marvelous, the community's wonderful. And then after 3 months, it's like, I don't like the schedule, and the food isn't good enough, and I want it changed, and this, that, the other thing. And so we were having she and I were having a good laugh about that. The other nuns were looking a little bit puzzled. But it's also a very, very nice place, and His Holiness has even given them some support, because he's so much likes the idea of what they're doing. And Venerable Gache, who had been here for a while, is doing retreat there, or was doing retreat there. Then another thing I did is I saw Geshe Sonam Rinchen, who has been one of my teachers since 1976, so many years. And he's been teaching at the library probably since maybe 73, 74, something, really from very, very early on. And he has stomach cancer now, and so had to retire from his teaching position a few months ago, which was a big shift for the library after all these years, for him to retire. And Ruth, a British woman who had been his translator for most of that time, also, retired from serving at the library. So it was quite a big shift. And I had last seen Geshe-la a year ago when I was in India, and at that time I thought that was going to be the last time I saw him. But because of this Sangha meeting, research meeting, then I went to Dharamsala again, that hadn't been planned. So it was my good fortune that I got to see him again. And Ruth says that some days he has a lot of energy and some days not very much. And fortunately, the 2 times I went to see him, he had pretty good energy. And so the first time I went with Jamba Sedranla, and it was very interesting because her root teacher, Geshe Thupten Nawan, and Geshe Sonam Rinchen had been friends since they were children in Kham. Yeah, and there's a third Geshe, I think his name is Sepal, who recently passed away. He was the Geshe at Kurukula Center. So the 3 of them had kind of been a trio since they were very little kids. And her teacher had died some years ago. And so even though she didn't know Geshe Sonam Rinchen very well, she knew him, but not very well, since he was so close to her teacher, she wanted to talk to him about what she was doing and getting his advice. And so that was really beautiful to see that happen. And my experience with Genla is he gives such wonderful advice. He is really able to tune into people and see where they're at, and explains advice so clearly, and it's so often is just exactly what you need. And even I had consulted him when I lived in India about many difficult situations and what was a skillful way to act. And he always was able to explain it, what to do in a very skillful way. So that was very beautiful to see. And then the second time I went back, we had a long discussion about, Buddhism in Tibet and all sorts of things. And again, he had very good energy. So that was quite wonderful, I see. In between those two visits I had with him, he had gone to Delhi for a hospital check, and our friends Peter and Jessica, Peter had gone with the two Tibetan attendants to take him down. And the medical situation is quite difficult, and so his hemoglobin count goes down, and it's very irregular and so on. So we're not quite sure what's going to happen. So this time when I said goodbye to Genla, I really had the thought, this is probably the last time I'll see him. And so that was very difficult, to say goodbye to somebody who's been such a prominent figure in my life for so many years and given me so many teachings and so much good advice. And so when I left, part of my mind just felt so unhappy. And then as soon as I thought to myself, oh, but how fortunate I was to get to see him again, then my mind became happy. And then when I thought how fortunate I was to have him in my life for all the years I did have, then also my mind was happy. And then when I thought again that this was the last time I was going to see him and be able to, ask for advice and discuss things, then again my mind was sad. So it was quite interesting to see how the mind was sad and joyful, just depending upon the thought that happened to be in it at that moment. And of course I always remember in those situations, back in 1981 when Trijang Rinpoche passed away, and he was the teacher of most of the Geshis there. And that very afternoon, was a teaching that Geshe Nawan Darge, one of Trijang Rinpoche's students, he had been giving us continually a series of teachings, a small group of us in the afternoon. And so when Trijang Rinpoche died that day, instead of canceling the class, Gen Rinpoche had the class, and I just remember him being exceptionally just passionate about teaching that day. And it really struck me that upon the death of one of his most important teachers, he really took on the mantle and just said, okay, Trijang Rinpoche is gone now, I've got to do what he did, and I've got to help sentient beings the way he did. So that remains in my mind very strongly as a very good example of these kinds of situations. So I was remembering that as well.